All right, y'all, welcome to the show. Yes, the apocalypse is still here. Armageddon is right around the corner. Everything sucks. We're all going to die. I wish I had some good news for you guys from time to time on the show, but I really don't. So, in just a second, Trump takes a massive step toward martial law. We'll talk about that. The Trump regime is now not ruling out the idea of arresting Supreme Court justices. This video is from a few days back. I somehow missed it. I got it for you today. Then we'll get to Bernie fires back at the critics of his anti-oligarchy tour. So he takes aim at the pro-oligarchy Democrats, the fake Democrats, the dinos, Democrats in name only. So that's glorious. We'll dive into that. Trump is now about to slash funding for life-saving addiction medication. They're also threatening the arrest of Democratic governors. I got some amazing clips for you that just highlight a point I've been making on this show for months now, if not more than a year, that new media is a complete and total disgrace. And we have sloppy Steve Bannon turns on Trump in a moment of clarity. Will that stick is the question. And we have a MAGA economics expert gets an absolute beatdown in a hearing on tariffs. Ro Khanna slaps him around for the world to see. So we have all that and more. Everybody do me a big favor. Please subscribe to the channel. That helps out big time and costs you nothing at all. Again, everybody who supports this show on Patreon, I can't thank you enough. This show is what it is because of your support. I've never had a conversation with an advertiser. I've never done an ad read. You guys support the show with grassroots donations, $5 a month, stuff like that. I have that and the default ads on YouTube, and that's it. So again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you all. And I keep plugging this. It's super important. Everybody go subscribe to the Corin's World YouTube channel because we're dropping Kyle and Corin episodes over there. We have not missed a week since we started dropping it on his channel. So definitely go check my boy out, sub to his channel, hook a brother up. And all right, without that, with that being said, let's go ahead and dive into it. So every day we get more evidence of, I wouldn't say just creeping towards outright authoritarianism and fascism. I would say it's already here. The question is, how far are we going to go to the end goal, like complete and utter fascism? Well, Trump made a big move, which not many people are talking about, but I really think it highlights what's to come. So let's watch and then we'll break it down.
So here's kind of a sleeper issue that hasn't gotten much attention. But one of the things I want to do as we close in on the start of the second 100 days of Trump's term in office is I want to put a little bit of focus on things that haven't yet emerged as major issues, but heads up, they're coming. So here's one. You might not have heard anything about it, but this month, President Trump signed what he called a national security presidential memorandum, which declared that extended swaths of 3 contiguous states are all now technically a military base. It's 170 miles long, a long strip of federal land along the southern borders of California, Arizona, and New Mexico. And in this memo, Trump ordered the Pentagon, the Defense Department, to start taking control of this land. So now the U.S. military has taken control of 170 miles of land, starting in New Mexico, along New Mexico's southern border. And they've declared that that land is now part of Fort Huachuca, which is a U.S. Army base that's not even in New Mexico. It's in Arizona. Why would you take 170 miles of land in 3 different states and say all that land is now part of an Army base somewhere very far away? Well, the reason Trump is doing that is because he wants active duty U.S. military service members to start arresting people on U.S. soil. Last week, the military announced that U.S. soldiers are now authorized to arrest anyone who steps foot on that 170-mile-long strip of land. U.S. soldiers, active duty soldiers, are now newly authorized to search those people. They are authorized to implement crowd control. U.S. active duty troops searching and arresting people on U.S. soil and performing crowd control operations, again, on U.S. soil. And this land, yes, it is along the Mexican border, and migrants crossing the border are the stated targets of this new operation. So we may not think of this as something that matters for broader U.S. politics, or indeed the health of our political system. But if you're looking for big red flags in terms of authoritarian takeover in a democratic rule of law country, when you've got U.S. troops searching and arresting people and doing crowd control on U.S. soil, you're kind of there. Under American law, the Posse Comitatus Act is supposed to prevent the U.S. government from using U.S. soldiers on U.S. soil. Theoretically, if somebody wanders onto a military base, they can be arrested as trespassers on military property. So the idea, I think here, the neat trick that Trump has pulled here is that he's just turned hundreds of miles of American soil into what is technically a military base. And so, hey, presto, that's one neat trick to give the U.S. military the power to search and arrest people on U.S. soil.
This is what he's been doing, right? What he's been doing is finding ways to consolidate power by exploiting potential loopholes in the law. He views it as a cheat code to end democracy in this country, that just declare emergency powers for whatever you want to do. So the tariffs, for example, he's using emergency powers to do it, even though none of his arguments make sense. The idea that the argument was fentanyl originally. We got fentanyl coming from Canada and Mexico, therefore we need to slap a 25% tariff on both of them. Rand Paul actually made this point. He said, what, is Sweden and Monaco, are they also sending fentanyl into this country? Like, what exactly is the emergency? And this is going to go to court, right? And the Trump regime is going to have to make the argument in front of court why this is a legitimate national emergency. And they're going to fail. They're going to fail. Just like with the Alien Enemies Act, which is the rationale they're using to kidnap people and human traffic them. That's going to fail too, because that's only been used in U.S. history when there's been an actual war going on. There is no actual war. He says, we're declaring Venezuelan gangs, we're declaring them terrorists like they're waging war on us or something. Well, that's already on flimsy legal ground, because historically you would have needed to be at war with the country of Venezuela, not just like a gang contingent from within it. And then furthermore, it fails on factual grounds, because these people that they claim are Venezuelan gangsters are not by any stretch of the imagination. You got people like Kilmar Abrego Garcia, no criminal record whatsoever. You got people like the guy who had an autism awareness tattoo for his 15-year-old brother who has autism, who he takes care of. They use that tattoo as evidence of being in a gang when it's no such thing. They have Andres, the gay makeup artist, who's 19 years old. He's not in a gang, so it doesn't. At every level, these arguments fall apart. But they are moving at breakneck speed. The regime is, and the courts have to play catch up. And so tricks like this, it's like they do it, they act now, and then they worry about the consequences later. And then, as we've seen, when courts say, hey, you can't do this thing, you can't do that thing, this is unconstitutional, this is illegal, they blow them off.
And right now, they're only doing it at the edges, literally the physical edges of our country. But that is how you start. We've got expert advice on this and what this might mean for all of us here next. Stay with us. Donald Trump quietly has now declared that on a 170-mile strip of land across 3 different states, active duty U.S. soldiers now have the authority to arrest and search people. Active duty U.S. troops doing that on U.S. soil. Liza Goitein and Joseph Nunn at the Brennan Center for Justice tonight are calling this a slippery slope, saying, quote, if soldiers are allowed to take on domestic policing roles at the border, it may become easier to justify uses of the military in the U.S. interior in the future. Our nation's founders warned against the dangers of an army turned inward, which can all too easily be turned into an instrument of tyranny.
This is exactly like when there were the George Floyd protests and riots. Remember, Trump wanted to invoke the Insurrection Act. The only reason he couldn't is because General Mark Milley basically told him, we're not doing that. And he also said, why can't we shoot the protesters in the leg? Let's shoot the protesters in the leg. But it was the fact that there were some people around him that weren't totally insane sycophants that got us out of that situation. But this time around, that's not the case. This time around, it's all yes men.
Joining us now is Liza Goitein. She's Senior Director of the Brennan Center's Liberty and National Security Program. Ms. Goitein, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Is there anything about this order that authorizes U.S. soldiers to arrest and search people or use crowd control techniques only against non-U.S. citizens, or could these authorities also be used against U.S. citizens?
No, not at all. These authorities can be used against anyone who trespasses on this new military installation. And that installation does span 170 miles of the New Mexico border. But the original memorandum actually authorizes pretty much any federal lands along the southern border to be transferred to the Department of Defense, including a 60-foot strip of land, 60 feet wide, that actually spans about 600 miles along the California, Arizona, and New Mexico border.
When there's no due process, there are no protections and rights for U.S. citizens either. Because the whole idea of proving that you're a U.S. citizen, it happens when there's due process. It happens when there's a hearing. It happens when you get in front of an objective third party like a judge. So the fact that they don't use due process for any of these kidnappings and human traffickings that they're doing, that shows it's already the case there are no rights for Americans either, right? The idea, oh, we're just going to use this to target undocumented immigrant criminals. Well, we know that's not true, and they've already been deported. They deported a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 6-year-old, and the 4-year-old had cancer, and they were American citizens. This is what people need to understand. It never stops. It's the canary in the coal mine idea. They usually, if they're smart enough, they start with an example of somebody who's hard to defend, right? So like if they were more competent, they would have found somebody who committed 17 murders and not only is in a gang, but actually has MS-13 gang tattoos or whatever. And they would have sent that person to El Salvador, right? But they're so fucking stupid and incompetent and fascist that they were just like, I don't know, round up whoever the fuck we want. And these people are totally innocent. They're innocent. I mean, there was a story of a guy, like, I think he was a teenager who was playing with a water gun. ICE thought it was a real gun, arrested him, and he's being shipped to El Salvador. And now, this is my first time hearing about this, right? That they're basically declaring this massive swath of land, 170 miles worth, that's all now a U.S. military base, so anybody can be arrested and we can do whatever we want with you if we arrest you if you're in that zone.
So we are talking about just sort of a massive land grab that's being turned over to the Department of Defense in order to turn violations of immigration law into trespassing on a military installation. And again, I mean, that could apply to anybody who, without authorization, is on these strips of land on the southern border.
Yeah, I mean, I happen to think that the territorial boundaries of the United States extend all the way to the border, not just near them. And so the idea that U.S. soldiers are operating on U.S. soil with policing powers, to me, feels like every red flag in the world is kind of going off for me. I mean, we do have U.S. soldiers deployed to the border sort of all the time, acting in a support role to Customs and Border Protection. But this is a qualitatively different legal authority, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, what is happening here is an attempt to evade the laws passed by Congress and to usurp congressional authority, starting with the Posse Comitatus Act.
That's literally what they've been doing since they got in office this time. They've basically made it so Congress is null and void. Like, it doesn't even exist anymore. Because what do you call it when the world's richest man, Elon Musk, illegally hacks into the Treasury, steals everybody's data, deletes whatever government agencies he wants to delete, cuts off things like pediatric cancer research and Meals on Wheels? What do you call that? He has effectively usurped the power of Congress and the president, and he's clearly violating the Impoundment Control Act, where they just decide, even though this money's already been allocated for something, we're just not going to give it, right? That's usurping the power of Congress. And so now this is another way in which they are usurping the power of Congress.
And that law, as you mentioned, normally prohibits federal armed forces from engaging in these core law enforcement activities, things like arrests and searches and detentions. Now, courts have held that the military can provide indirect logistical support to law enforcement. That's what's been happening at the border for the last 20 years. But this is qualitatively different. It steps over that line, and that line between the military and civilian government is one of the most important safeguards that we have for personal liberty and for democracy, because, as Joseph and I said in our piece, an army turned inward can very quickly become an instrument of tyranny, and we have seen that in countries all over the world. So this is very different from what we have seen before, and it is an attempt to get around the Posse Comitatus Act, which ordinarily requires Congress to authorize these types of activities anywhere in the country.
Liza Goitein, Senior Director of the Brennan Center's Liberty and National Security Program. This is a story that we are just starting to cover. This will not be the last time that we cover it. We'd love to have you back to talk more about it as we learn more.
So, look, we talked about it before, but we got lucky. We dodged a bullet on April 20th because Trump signed an executive order saying, Kristi Noem and Pete Hegseth have to give me a report on whether or not I should invoke the Insurrection Act and declare martial law over the border. And there were so many signs, there was so much evidence that that's exactly what they were going to do, right? But we got lucky. They didn't invoke the Insurrection Act on 4/20. And I took a deep breath when that happened. But the fact of the matter is the report said there's no need for it yet. And I don't know what their rationale was. I don't know if they thought, hey, at the moment, we don't have the political capital to be able to pull this off, especially with all the stuff going on around the illegal kidnappings and human traffickings, they call them deportations. They're not deportations. I don't know if they felt like there was too much on their plate and they wouldn't really get away with it, or I don't know. It's very possible they were just so incompetent they couldn't get the logistics right to do the Insurrection Act and martial law, right? I don't know why, but we got lucky on 4/20. But what's clear is they could still do it. They could still eventually do the exact same thing and invoke the Insurrection Act and lock the whole country down based on the invasion at the border. They could do that. And this is almost like you would call it a middle ground between not doing it and doing it, what they're describing right here. And you're going to see it's going to be mission creep. And that's why Rachel said that at the end. It's going to be mission creep. They're going to do more and more and more and more. And I got another example of it right here. This is in Rolling Stone. Trump issues executive order ramping up American police state. The order directs the government to provide legal resources to police officers accused of wrongdoing. During Donald Trump's final weeks of his 2024 re-election campaign, he fantasized about one really violent day of policing as an answer to eradicating crime in America. That's what we call the purge, ladies and gentlemen. Speaking to supporters gathered at the Bayfront Convention Center in Erie, Pennsylvania, in late September, Trump used one rough hour, and I mean real rough. The word will get out and it will end immediately, you know? On Monday, as he prepared to celebrate his 100th day back in the White House, President Trump signed an executive order. This is new, ramping up his efforts to embolden law enforcement across the country and shield them from accountability. The president instructed his administration to unleash high-impact local police forces, protect and defend law enforcement officers wrongly accused and abused by state or local officials, and surge resources to officers in need. Trump directed Attorney General Pam Bondi to launch a program providing free legal resources to police officers accused of wrongdoing, while also ordering his administration to increase the supply of excess military and national security assets to local law enforcement. So this is militarizing the police and saying, no matter what you do, we're on your side. If you're clearly in the wrong, if you're clearly violating the law, if you are being violent, if you are using excessive force, we got your back. Now, by the way, this is the height of irony. Why? Because he pardoned, 1,200 or 1,900 January 6ers? He pardoned all of them. And by the way, over 100 of them were guilty of violently assaulting police officers. So he pardoned cop beaters, but that's because those cop beaters in particular, they were on his team. They were on his side. So he feels like, you're not the problem. I like when you do violence because you're doing violence for me. But now what he's saying is, hey, bro, it is open season. You do whatever the fuck you want. Here's more military equipment, and we're going to give you legal backup and legal resources, and there is no such thing as excessive force anymore. Compare this to, I think Biden did, like a national bad cop registry, basically. So all the police officers who have a history of being violent and abusing their authority, there was like a database of them. And the whole point was, let's disincentivize, let's make it so nobody hires these cops. Trump is like, bring back the worst cops, arm them, and let them get away with whatever the fuck they want to get away with. And how do you think these forces are going to be used, right? We're already seeing they're arresting people and holding them indefinitely for criticizing Israel, right? If you lead a pro-Palestine protest, if you write an op-ed, like Rumeysa Ozturk, who mildly criticized Israel in an op-ed, boom, locked up indefinitely. They're trying to take away the visas. They're taking legal immigrants, trying to kick them out of the country for their free speech politically, where they criticize Israel. So there's all these things that Trump views them as thought crimes, and now he's green-lighting the police to be more violent, to get more weapons, to know the government has their back, and to try to get them out of trouble whenever they do something bad and wrong. Bruh. And again, I'll say it again. We're 100 days in, dog. We're 100 days in, bro. This is 100 days. Can you imagine what this is going to look like in year 4? Can you imagine what's going to be happening? Oh, man. At this point, as I keep saying, there is no such thing as a moderate Trump supporter. If you still support this, you are a fascist. You're just a fascist. Now, you might not be comfortable with that. You might not like that. It's just the truth. Because there's been nothing this man has done that you've said, you know what, that's a bridge too far. I'm against that. There's been nothing. Don't even make me go through the policy list. You know how long I could babble about that shit. On the first day in office, he signed an executive order that effectively raises drug prices. Higher drug prices. Nobody supports that. You didn't see that and go, you know what, I'm done here. When he repeatedly repealed multiple rules and laws that are anti-corruption laws, he said his whole cabinet, you can be as corrupt as you want. You don't have to abide by any ethics laws anymore. That didn't go too far for you? There's nothing this man did. So just own it. It is what it is. If you support this, you're a fascist, period. And that's why everybody's been saying, look, Fox News has turned into just an outright fascist news network. It looks like North Korean state propaganda. And it's only going to get worse. There was just, oh my God. Yesterday they had, I wish I pulled up one of these videos, but yesterday they had another one of the cabinet meetings and cameras were in there. Guys, I kid you not. Every single speaker has to start with, "Sir, I want to thank you for how amazing you are and how in just 100 days you did more than any other administration in history and you made everything amazing. So thank you, sir, from the bottom of my heart. You're incredible. We love you." Everybody had to start like that. Do people understand how fucked we are looking at this? That we have a president who lies like he breathes and has the temperament of a toddler and is a violent fascist? Are you not getting it yet? So the authoritarianism is here, bro. This was a massive step toward martial law. That's what we're talking about. That's what we're witnessing. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop. And watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.